Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development, where we share original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. We hope you join us often for practitioner-oriented content around all things related to leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with Human Capital Innovations Podcast. If you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations Podcast, enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page, and please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. In this HCI Podcast episode, I talk with Riley Noland about the role technology plays in the evolution of manufacturing facilities. Riley Noland, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the San Francisco area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the role technology plays in the evolution of manufacturing facilities. You have a lot of expertise in this area, and it's a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate you taking your time to share your insights with me and my audience. As we get started, I wanted to share Riley's bio with everybody. Riley Noland is the co-founder of Tumiki Ergonomics, a computer vision platform that automatically assesses injury risk in manufacturing facilities, where he has a strong focus on customer development and strategy. He graduated from Stanford in the Symbolic Systems Department, where he was previously vice president of Stanford's Entrepreneurial Society bases. Riley has also developed a new fund of funds investment strategy at Silicon Valley Bank Capital. A pleasure to be with you, Riley. Anything else you would like to add by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
Yeah, absolutely. No, John, thanks for the introduction. No, I think if there's anything else just to be said, obviously we are kind of at the forefront of computer vision and new AI technology in the world of manufacturing, right? So our goal is really to kind of try and bridge that gap, bring new advances in technology to, a part of the industry that has traditionally been somewhat neglected from those advances. Our goal is to kind of bring about some of those major improvements and help improve lives with it.
Well, very good. So let's start by just talking about some of the shifts and evolutions in manufacturing facilities, generally speaking. Clearly, the economic composition of, or the sectoral composition of the economy has shifted dramatically over the last 50, 60 plus years. We used to be much more heavily manufacturing based, less so now, but it's still a predominant and strong sector. Tell us a little bit more about how you have seen some of those manufacturing facilities evolutions over the past decade or so.
Totally. No, it's a very interesting question. And I think, if you read the news, you'll see a lot of headlines and articles talking about, bringing back manufacturing from offshore into the States, which is to say we have a lot of manufacturing that is offshore. And that is certainly a reality. I think the other reality is that we do still have a lot of manufacturing in North America, South America, Europe, as well as in Oceania, as well as Japan. And what you'll find in situations in these countries versus, let's take China, for example, is that you have a very expensive workforce, right? So you still have people doing manual labor, you still have manufacturing, but the expertise and the just cost of labor is much higher. The result of that is, there's a very high incentive and need to keep these people safe, keep them happy, and keep them productive as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So where China may have been the place for cheap labor in the manufacturing sector 3 decades ago, now that's shifted more, right? So I hear a lot of talk about the growth of Vietnam, for example, as a place, exactly, as a hub for manufacturing or whatever, right? We could talk about a lot of different things in that way. But the reality is that there's those shifts happening in manufacturing for sure. And then what do you see like within a manufacturing facility? How are things evolving?
Yeah. So, I think there is a misconception, certainly in Silicon Valley, that factories are basically these dark places, right, where there's no human in the loop, there's no human in the floor, it's all robots moving around and building things. That's just not where we're at currently. And in my opinion, and the opinion of our company, is that that's not where we'll be, at least for the next 20 years. And the reality is that you still have a lot of jobs that require skilled individuals. I was kind of speaking to earlier, having that skilled workforce of manual labor and machinery, and manual inputs. So that is what we see. I think even The Economist had an article like a few weeks ago just talking about how this expected rapid, industrialization in terms of bringing on automated, machinery during the pandemic, kind of during 2020, it didn't really pan out, right? It didn't really happen as was expected. In fact, what we see is still such a huge, demand in terms of manual labor for these manufacturing sites. Obviously, if you're looking at kind of the China example and in Vietnam as well in Southeast Asia, you do continue seeing a lot of, I'll just say cheaper manual labor, right? That is not so much the case anymore in, Oceania, so Australia, New Zealand, North America, as well as in Europe.
That tracks with my experience, which is a little bit older, but back in the early 2000s, back before I was going to school, I'd spent a couple years abroad. I had come back. I needed to save up some money to go to college. I worked in a factory, and certainly there were some automations and robotics being used, but it was mostly people in there doing stuff, and there were hundreds of employees that worked in this factory, and I was one of them. And I have to admit, it wasn't my favorite job ever. I'm glad that I was able to do that job, earn money, and then go to school and not have to do that again. But the reality is there's all sorts of highly technical jobs that happen within factories, and we're certainly 20 plus years later, we're further down the path of automation and robotics and the use of all those things than we were back when I was doing factory work. But it's still not like you think about oftentimes, like how it gets talked about in popular press or TV or movies or whatever. It's not all robots. And that's your point. And I just want to reemphasize that, because that certainly is still not the case. And I work with manufacturing facilities, sometimes in a consulting role. There are still plenty of people doing really important jobs to help those facilities run. And we're not to the point where everyone's been replaced.
No, and I think, and thanks for bringing this up too. I mean, I think, and this isn't a bad thing, right? This is actually a very positive thing, in my opinion, right? To build these robotics and, these tools, these automated tools to do some of this really fine-grained manufacturing is really tough. And in fact, there's plenty of startups in the Valley itself, and everywhere else, but certainly in the Valley, of trying to solve this problem. And it turns out it's a very difficult problem, right? You can have a little bot that moves a pallet box from point A to point B, right? That's a solved problem, easy enough. But if you're a big car manufacturer, right, and you need to make a new model of your car every year, and it's slightly different, right, so you can have that nice margin, right, and upsell. Reprogramming your bots and your robotic arms and your CNC machines in your facility to do that, it's tough. And, it just turns out it's just much easier. It's much better to, continue having people in that loop. And that's kind of the goal of Tamiki, right? With that realization, we want to come in and make that process as smooth as possible. Also keeping in mind that these are still people. They're working very hard. They're a critical component to any company, let alone to the United States manufacturing base. And our hypothesis is that a safer individual or a person who's working more safely is healthier, is not concerned about being injured 5-10 years in the future, is also going to be more productive and just generally happier.
Well, let's talk a little bit more then about ergonomics. At Tamiki Ergonomics, of course, you're focusing so much on the safety side, the injury and risk side, and that brings in the ergonomic piece.
An important piece to note too, we focus exclusively on ergonomics, which is to say musculoskeletal injuries, soft tissue injuries. So we're looking at combating someone walking away 5 years after a job with a terrible neck sprain, right? Or a shoulder strain such that they can never lift their arm above 90 degrees, or lower back pain, right? Which is certainly kind of the poster child for musculoskeletal injuries. What we don't focus on are other things like lockout, tagout, or slipping off a ladder, or, something in that realm. So we're very very focused, very niche kind of attempt to really eliminate all injuries in a manufacturing sense. So, the idea behind ergonomics is there is a correct way to do a job from a joint angle measurement perspective, right? There's a correct way to bend your back when you're lifting a 35-pound box, and there's a very wrong way to be bending your back lifting a 35-pound box. What we do is, using computer vision, we allow individuals to just take a video of themselves doing that task. So let's take the easiest, most simple example. You are moving a 35-pound box from point A, a pallet of boxes onto a conveyor belt. And you do this, 8 hours a day, right? So using our product, you would basically take a video of yourself doing that job, moving that box from point A to point B, 2 or 3 times. And we'll tell you, okay, at this point, about 15 seconds into this job cycle, you were bending at a really bad angle for the fact of lifting this 35-pound box. What that is, maybe it's 25 degrees, 35 degrees, whatever it is. Our product tells you why you were doing it incorrectly, how you were doing it incorrectly, and what you can be doing to actually perform this task in an ergonomic, so as to say, safe way.
Yeah, and that's huge. If, like you said, if you're doing this, one box, lifting it over, and you don't do it in the right way, probably not that big of an impact. But when you're doing it repetitively, an entire shift, multiple shifts, day in, day out, even over years, I mean, that's where you get to these repetitive injuries and the workers' compensation claims and all of that kind of stuff then comes as people experience those injuries in the workplace. I just recently had to have, and I'm going to have surgery on my right arm too, but I just recently had surgery on my left arm, in my elbow and my wrist, for repetitive motion injuries, probably that I sustained when I was working at the factory 20 years ago. It's been bothering me for forever, and I finally decided to take care of it. And I need to do my other arm too. And that was only for a relatively short period of time. And so people who do that, as their career job, it's no wonder that as they get older and your body is less resilient, you're doing all these repetitive motion tasks, that it's going to take a huge toll on you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right. And the big problem here too is that, unlike a slip and trip, or unlike you break your arm, there's no discrete point in time you can point to and say, yes, this is when, my left, in your case, right, my left arm was injured, right? It's just that kind of buildup, that routine stress and strain of doing whatever task you were doing that kind of caused this chronic pain. So when you go into the doctor's office, right, and you say, my back hurts, I have strain in my lower back, it's an incredibly difficult problem to solve for this very reason, right? So the hypothesis is, if we can really catch it when you're doing it incorrectly, you'll avoid that entire situation of repeatedly putting your body in a stressful, in an improper, in a bad ergonomic positioning. And that's how you eliminate these injuries, these problems.
Yeah. So you described a little bit, at least one example of the box, and taking a video of yourself, taking a video of yourself doing it a few times, that gets analyzed using this computer vision technology. Can you give us some other examples of what that might look like in a factory setting or a manufacturing facility?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, totally depends on what the factory is doing. So the really nice thing about the Tamiki platform and our technology is that it's agnostic to the to the job that's being done. It doesn't matter if you're lifting a box. It doesn't matter if you're, welding some kind of widget, if you're working on some kind of battery on like a, wind power or turbine. The fact of the matter is, what we do is we screen for and check, are your joint angle measurements in an improper, dangerous position? And it turns out, it doesn't really matter what you're doing per se. What matters is how you're doing it. So absolutely. I mean, to answer your question, we analyze jobs, across a variety of different industries. So, automotive, energy production, as I was mentioning, with like, wind turbines, heavy industrial manufacturing. So, trains, engines, that sort, food processing, as you can imagine, a lot of times, the example that comes to mind for food processing is that you'll have a conveyor belt of, let's say, sausages or, prepackaged cheese, whatever it is, right? And you will have individuals whose job is to basically kind of move them from the conveyor belt with their hands and wrists into a box. there are ways to do that where you can put your wrist into very bad positioning, right? And you can very quickly develop carpal tunnel syndrome. So what we do is we come in and kind of, lay out, okay, if you're twisting your wrist at this time, don't do that. There are other ways to perform this job, such that you're not putting yourself in harm's way. And kind of presenting that information in a very easy to read, easy to digest, and take action on, actionable way.
So tell us a little bit more about the results that you've seen in working with your clients, facilities that have implemented the computer vision technology to look at the ergonomics and to do those analysis. What are you seeing in terms of the risk and injury reduction and any other kind of bottom line measures that would be helping organizations?
Totally. Yeah. So I think first and foremost, what's really exciting for this technology is, there's this term in Silicon Valley. There is taking humans out of the loop, and there is technology that keeps humans in the loop, right? And this is very much a human in the loop technology and platform, right? And I think that's important to say first and foremost is that I think AI can kind of come with this thought that it may be taking people's jobs away. It might be a threat to people's livelihoods. That is certainly true in some of the technologies we're seeing. We'll see what happens with ChatGPT, but I think with computer vision tools and AI tools in the sector of ergonomics, it's very much a human in the loop solution. So by that, I mean, the process of doing ergonomic assessments or ergonomic due diligence is something that's been done, for the past 30 years, and it's still currently done, even for organizations that have never heard of computer vision, like Tumiki Ergonomics, right? What you'll do is you'll walk out on the plant floor with a clipboard, paper, and pencil, and you will by hand get the joint angle measurements, and you will throw that into some medically predetermined ergonomic assessment, and you'll get a risk score. This is a high risk. This is a low risk. It's really tough to do that by hand, right? Probably takes you an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes, depending on how your experience in this field. Using our tool takes you about a minute, tops maybe 4 to 5 minutes to get that assessment result. So the big kind of thing we come to when first kind of talking with potential users is you're going to save a ton of time, right? You're not going to spend your time trying to identify hazardous jobs. You're going to spend your time, take videos, 5-10 videos. There you go. Maybe that's 45 minutes in your day. And now you're actually going to be able to spend your time making actionable progress towards eliminating injuries using the information from the Tumiki platform. So that's the first thing, right? Huge time-saving component. Obviously, with that information and just the fact you're doing so many more assessments and you have such a deeper insight into these jobs that are causing injuries, you do have a reduction in injuries as well, right? So what we've seen typically is a year-over-year savings for a given facility of about $200,000 in injury reduction costs. So that's a big thing as well. The last thing I'd say too, which is somewhat hard to quantify, but I think there is something very powerful to being able to see visually how you are doing the job from a safety perspective. So one of the things that the Tumiki platform does is we actually draw this nice little, we call it the 3D skeleton rendering. It's a nice little 3D skeleton, that goes over all the joint angle measurements of the individual. And if you replay that video, what you can see is, well, as my back was bending in a terrible position, this skeleton went from green, which is good, to red, which is like not good, right? This is bad. And to get that information and to open that dialogue between people on the safety staff towards, people on the line, maybe site managers, is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, I love it. And I think, of course, there's these bottom line benefits, as we both mentioned. But let's not forget just the human element and the human benefit of just having good, healthy, safe people. We should want that anyways, regardless. So even if there wasn't, cost savings due to, lower healthcare costs or fewer health claims and those sorts of things, lower absenteeism, lower, instances of people not being able to do their job, all of that, even if that wasn't the case, we should still be trying to make sure that our people are safe. But the truth is, it is the case. It is the case. And it's a no-brainer that not only should we take care of our people because we care about them and we want to treat them with dignity and respect, and we don't want to exploit our workers, we should also make sure that we're doing it because it will help us save money. It will help our people be more productive. It will help us attract and retain better people because they're not hurting, from doing these jobs.
Yeah.
And they see it as something like, when you realize you can do a job like this and not ruin your physical health,
not be injured. Yeah.
and not be injured, then it becomes a viable option, right? A viable long-term option for people, instead of maybe a stepping stone like it was for me.
100%. Yes, exactly. And I think, what gets me very excited about, Tamiki Ergonomics, that the work we're doing, is that there is this huge alignment of incentives, right? It's all of a sudden, we live in the world we live in. And, I guess the bottom line at the end of the day for most, really any manufacturing facility, is the bottom line, their output, their yield, how much money is being brought in. But it just so happens, when you add into this mix technologies like Tamiki Ergonomics and computer vision, streamlining these safety protocols, you have a huge alignment of incentives where not only are they saving money, increasing productivity, getting further insights into their production cycles from a safety perspective, but people are also safer. People tend to be happier. People tend to work longer. They tend to stay at the same company longer. So now you don't have to retrain someone for the same job every 4 to 5 months. So it's a very exciting byproduct of this technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And less people listening think that who would actually stay at in a manufacturing facility or in a factory for their entire career. Well, I'll tell you, when I worked in a factory, 80% of the people there were people that were career, lifers.
Oh yeah.
And plenty of people do that for their career. And the question is, how long can they do it before their body gives in on them and they can't do it anymore? And so this is really, really important. And ultimately, I want to be able to go to work and make a contribution, but not have it take away my ability to go home and enjoy time with my family. Or, if I'm looking forward to retirement, am I going to be able to do anything in retirement? So these are the things people think about. And the reality is, it can be a very viable option. And it is for many people. This can just make it all that much better. And I was talking with a CEO of a manufacturing facility in the Northeast a couple months ago, and he was describing some of their efforts in the space around injury and risk and safety and such, and he was describing their turnover rate. And in the industry, their normal turnover rate would be fairly high, but at his company, in his facility, it was like 1/10 of the industry average. And why? Because they gave so much attention to this. And we know how expensive turnover costs are for an organization. Like you said, if you're bringing new people in every, 4 to 6 months and having to train them and get them up to speed and all of that, not to mention just the recruiting costs and everything associated with it, it's a huge cost. So you have those cost savings. There's so many different ways that this is truly beneficial to the bottom line of the organization. And of course, it's humane, and it shows our people that we care about them when we take care of their health.
Yeah. I mean, couldn't have said it better. No, exactly. It's a great alignment of incentives. I think people are realizing that, and certainly now in the current job market, right, it is a worker's job market, right? They can kind of have that purchasing power to decide where they want to work. And why would you want to work somewhere where you're going to be injured and in pain 20 years after doing the job? There's no reason. And so I think, kind of tackling it head on, realizing the facts that we now have the tools to actively and effectively tackle this problem. It's an exciting thing.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Riley, it has been a real pleasure. I know at the time I need to let you go here in just a minute, but before we wrap things up today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you and find out more about your work, your team, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in getting in touch with our team, probably the best way is visiting our website. That's www.tumeke.io. That's TUMEKE. We do have a free trial on the platform for 14 days. Basically, if you're curious about the technology, just kind of want to try it for yourself, maybe even try it at home, you can sign up there. You'll get the application on your phone as well as your laptop, and you can just use it 14 days. See if it's helping you, something you would be interested in using. I guess in terms of a last thing to say on the topic, I think for us, it's this particularly exciting time to be trying to bridge that gap between new technologies, things that have been kind of in the R&D sector for the past 10, 15 years that are now being brought into the public domain in the sense of, kind of general industry, right? And being a part of that journey and helping people is incredibly exciting for us. It's what we, really pride ourselves on as a company. And it is also what we will continue to be doing for the future.
Wonderful. Thank you, Riley. It's really been a pleasure. I encourage my audience to reach out, get connected, find out more about what Riley and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Do you enjoy the Human Capital Innovations podcast? Enjoy ad-free listening by going to the Patreon page. And please consider contributing even at the producer or sponsorship level. And please leave a review. Thank you for your support. Thanks again for joining us for this episode of the Human Capital Innovations Podcast. I hope you stay healthy and safe and that you have a great week.